Good afternoon. I open this academic ceremony in which Ms. Eni Tresa will defend the academic thesis Europeanization of Western Balkans health policy. I wish you lots of success, of course. I welcome also your supervisors, Professor Chabanovska, Dr. Clemens, and Professor Burazeri, and of course the opponents who you will meet later on, and also all friends and families and colleagues online. But before we start your position, I would like to invite you to present what you have researched in your thesis. The floor is yours.
Dear Prorector, dear family and Corona members, dear friends and audience, in the next 15 minutes I will present my research entitled Europeanization of Western Balkans Health Policy. Western Balkans is a complex region full of problems in the past, but all the Western Balkan countries are trying to join together European Union. They are facing different problems, but they have a common future. In any case, they are in different stages of Europeanization process, of European integration one. So Croatia is a European member state. Albania, Serbia, Montenegro, and Republic of North Macedonia are EU candidate countries. Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Kosovo are potential candidate countries. In this research, Kosovo is excluded due to its late start of Europeanization process and signing of Association and Stabilization Agreement. The Western Balkan countries have different country health profiles, but during the years, beside of a lot of research conducted about the health profiles of the countries, there is no research conducted about how does the Europeanization process influences the health of the Western Balkan countries. So this is the very first research conducted in the region about the Europeanization. In this table here, I'm presenting how is the health profile of the countries. So Albania has a life expectancy of almost 79 years old in 2019. Meantime, Serbia has a high mortality from cardiovascular diseases of people in between 30 and 70 years old of 22%. In this research, the definition used as for Europeanization is that Europeanization is the process of construction, diffusion, and institutionalization of formal and informal rules, procedures, policy paradigms, styles, ways of doing things, and shared beliefs and norms, which are first defined and consolidating in making the EU decisions, and then incorporating the logic of domestic discourse, identities, political structures, and public policies. This definition was first published by Radelli in 2003, and the reason why I use it as operational one is that this definition is very wide and allows me to see a lot about the Europeanization process. So this is the theoretical framework employed for this study. This framework was firstly published by Huen in 2005, and it allows us to see how the contextual determinants, distal and proximal ones, influence population health in terms of globalization. In my case, I'm using it to see how the Europeanization process is influencing population health in the region, and at these different levels. So for my research, I have selected the topics that are high in the Western Balkans health agenda that include public health legislation, health services, health insurance, pharmaceutical policies, alcohol policies, and non-formal education methodology that is much promoted by the European Commission, especially to be used with young people. So the general aim of this thesis is to explore how Europeanization process influences public health policy development in the Western Balkan countries in between 1991 and 2021. So the first objective is to describe public health policy development in the Western Balkan region. In this case, I've been analyzing 90 progress reports that the Western Balkan countries sent to the European Commission from 2005 to 2020 for a period of 15 years, analyzing them using traditional policy analysis. This article was published in Health Policy in 2022. The second objective of the research was to document how the Europeanization process influences national policies designated to alter alcohol consumption in the region. In this case, I used World Bank data about the levels of alcohol consumption in liters per capita in the Western Balkan countries and compared them with Caucasus countries that already did not start the Europeanization process. And for this quantitative policy analysis, I used difference in difference analysis. The article was published in European Journal of Public Health in 2017. The third and fourth objective are focusing on pharmaceutical policies, the third one on the Western Balkans pharmaceutical policies in order to identify and describe key patterns and elements of these policies using qualitative comparative analysis. This article was submitted in a journal. The fourth objective was to explore how the pharmaceutical legislation in Albania is changing. And for analyzing this data, I used the country legislation that is published in the official newsletter of the government. This article was published in Southeast European Journal of Public Health. So the fifth objective of my study is to explore how does non-formal education methodology contribute to health promotion, especially the one with young people. So in this case, I used mixed methods approach, first conducting two focus groups, one with students of medical sciences and one with students of other areas, in order not to have a bias because of information that medical students might have for health promotion. After that, I conducted 113 interviews with young people participating in non-formal education activities to see what they think about the activities. In this case, the article was published in Health Promotion International in 2021. Here is the framework adapted in my study. So in the first study, I adapted the framework of UN that I mentioned before, based on my findings. So beside of contextual, distal, and proximal levels, now I can see how the Europeanization process influences policies at institutional level, like European policies, corresponding to the first objective of political changes regarding health insurance, health policy in general. Then how it is influencing national health policies, like I mentioned, pharmaceutical policies, alcohol consumption policies. Then at lower level, at proximal one, I can see how at social cultural elements of European community mobility programs are changing social environmental lifestyle and health literacy of young people at local level. So after analyzing the 90 progress reports, there were identified 27 main health topics, but for the reason of the study, answering to the first objective, there were selected these three main areas that are high in the political agenda of the Western Balkan countries. Here we can see how different countries made changes in their legislations at different years, also depending on the year that they started the Europeanization process. For instance, Croatia recognized European health insurance card in 2008, meantime Albania did it in 2016. Regarding the alcohol consumption, we can say that there are legislations regarding limiting physical access of alcohol, banning it during the night time, and also selling alcohol for adults over 18 years old. Besides of the political changes, we can see differences in poor alcohol consumption and spirits consumption in the region. There is a decrease of spirits consumption in Croatia, Macedonia, and Serbia with 1 liter per capita. If we compare them with, as I said, with Georgia and Azerbaijan that haven't started the process, and also adjusting for income and unemployment. Regarding the pharmaceutical policies, we can see the international agreement that has been signed by different countries. Actually, there is Croatia, Serbia, and Republic of North Macedonia that have signed these international agreements. There are institutional changes in the Western Balkan countries. There is Bosnia, Republic of North Macedonia, Albania that have built new institutions. There are policies undertaken at local level about the antibiotic use, as well as Albania has improved the law on medicine and pharmaceutical services, has revised the law on medical devices, and has been granting marketing authorization for medicines for human use. Regarding non-formal education methodology, I can say that it is very suitable for health promotion activities with young people. Despite of gender, disability, age of people, it offers equal opportunities to all participants to learn, improve their health, reflect on their health, and change their habits in obtaining new one. And this happens in taking in consideration the components of non-formal education methodology as participation, reflection behavior, group spirit, communication, learning, and activity methods. Here we can see that almost 60% of the participants receive valuable information for life in non-formal education activities, help them to improve their skills and competencies. So regarding causality, there are some limitations in our study as I have been using qualitative data of EU progress reports. They do not have quantitative data, and for this reason I tried to, and I used the World Bank data of alcohol consumption to have some quantitative data. But in any case, there is underestimated alcohol consumption, about unrecorded production of beer, wine, and especially spirits as a rakia in the region, as well as there is no quantification of the economical and social influences of these policies. Recommendations: I would recommend that the Western Balkan countries revise law implementation, that they they have good laws, but they should reinforce its implementation. There should be control of beer and wine consumption. If they are decreasing consumption of spirits, they should also be careful not to consume more beer and wine than needed, because it might cause damage in the health. Some countries, as I mentioned, have signed joint procurement agreement, but other countries, as Montenegro, Albania, should also sign to try to buy medicines all together in the region in order to have them with a lower price, as the Western Balkan countries are low in population compared with other big countries of Europe. More activities should be conducted on antibiotic use. So there is Macedonia, Bosnia, and Albania conducting activities, but also in Serbia and other countries should be more activities on antibiotics use. And also Western Balkan countries should apply for more funds in European Commission, funds that are available for non-formal education with young people. Thank you very much for your attention. I will give the floor back to the prorector.
Thank you very much, Ms. Candidate. And now we will start with the opposition. And the opposition will be opened by Professor Pavlova, who's also the chair of the assessment committee, and she has also accepted the role of secretary today, for which I'm very grateful. And she's a professor of health economics and equity in the University of Maastricht. Professor Pavlova.
Thank you. Dear candidate, first of all, my congratulations to you and your supervisory team for this important dissertation. You have investigated a topic which I believe has very high relevance for policy research and for society. And I'm sure that evidence that you provide in your dissertation extends further than the region of Western Balkans, and perhaps they can be also extrapolated to Balkan region and further on. In your dissertation, you have presented very insightful studies, and all of them, they trigger very important discussions. But I would like to discuss with you chapter 3, because I found that chapter especially ambitious from a methodology point of view. So I would like to discuss the methods in that chapter. The quantitative analysis that you present in chapter 3 is very important, because you try to study the impact of European policy, and also the study is published in a very prestigious journal, which means that it has received the approval of other researchers as well. But I find the methodology section very brief and unclear, and this makes me to wonder how certain we can be in your findings, in the presentation of your findings and in the conclusions. So I would like to discuss those with you. So you are applying the difference approach in that chapter to study impact, and this is a very peculiar method and requires proper explanation. So it is unclear to me what kind of data you use, how you did matching, and why you did or you didn't do, and how do you perform the difference in different statistics. So could you please clarify for us this before we go further with the discussion?
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent, for your question. So for the third chapter, I use difference in difference methodology. Difference in difference methodology, basing on the literature, is much used in US about policies of marijuana. Some countries have been legitimizing marijuana use in the US countries, and some others did not. So there is much research conducted there in literature about comparing the countries that have already started using this law and the others not. So taking advantage of this natural experiment, if I can say so, of Europeanization in Western Balkan countries, I wanted to see how does this Europeanization process helps the alcohol influences, not help, but influences the alcohol consumption policies in the Western Balkans. So in this case, the comparison was done with the countries of Caucasus. They have not started the process of Europeanization. They have not started yet. So this was the way that the comparison was done. About the matching was done based on the levels of consumption and based on the levels on some economical indicators of the countries. So regarding the analysis, first of all, we did some linear regression. Then we did unadjusted, I did unadjusted regression, then adjusted regression, controlling for unemployment and income, because it might happen that due to unemployment or low income, people might consume more alcohol, but in the adjusted regression, it resulted that we have this decrease with 1 liter per capita in the consumption of spirits in these 3 countries, Croatia, Serbia, and Macedonia.
Thank you. I can now better understand your results. I still doubt whether the matching was properly done, considering the limited number of factors that you take into account. So I was wondering, do you think that your results really demonstrate causal effect, or is simply association? Do you think that the analysis, I assume it's also limited by the type of data available. Did the analysis allow you to actually find causal effects in the?
In fact, there was a cut in time of the alcohol consumption. Like at the year that the Europeanization process started, it was a cut in time to see how was the consumption before and how is the consumption after the years. And as the cutting time was the year that each of the countries started the Europeanization and signed the association and stabilization agreement. This was. And regarding the causality, I think, yes, it indicates, because in fact, there is no other study about it, and it helps to have a better idea on how it's going on. And all my data are actually also explained by the policy changes in the region. When we see the policy changes in the progress reports, we see that the European Commission is actually fostering increase in the spirits political and taxes there is an increase in axes of spirits in the countries. So this both go in the same direction, that the increase of prices of spirits is also showing a decrease of spirits consumption in the region. Meantime, the European Commission and the EU as an economical joining is fostering local production of beer and wine. So even in the region, what we see is that in my study, there is a decreased consumption of spirits due to its high taxes, and there is starting to have an increase of wine and beer consumption due to also low prices. For instance, the axis for beer and wine is almost zero for local production in the country. Meantime, for spirits is almost 900 euros per liter, so it's very high.
Thank you. Let's be a bit more concrete about future studies. So based on chapter 3 and all the lessons that you learned and all the limitation in the data and analysis that you have experienced, if you have to explore this topic further, what kind of study design you would employ? Would you do another better difference in difference study when you can collect data that you need for that analysis, or you propose another type of analysis?
Like if I would have the time, I would conduct a cohort study. The cohort study would allow me to see and to collect data now for a long period of time to see how this is happening and how it is changing. But at the certain time that I started the study, I didn't have the possibility to collect the cohort data. So I used the data available of World Bank I had a mixed methods in a way to see the political changes together with the changes of consumption in liters per capita. But to have a better idea of everything and of course to prove causality, I would use cohort study.
Thank you very much. Finally, I still see I have a minute or two. So if I may, I would like to ask a very brief question about the specific study setting, because it was Balkans, but your study results could have a difference for could have implication for the whole region, so also for other Balkan countries. If you look at your main findings, which of your findings you think that are really specific for the study setting, and which findings you think that they could be also extrapolated to other Balkan countries?
Short answer, please.
Yes, in fact, there is a decrease in 1 liter per capita, which is specific for the countries. And wide, we can see the policy changes about the taxes. More taxes on spirits would indicate a decrease of spirits consumption, and less taxes for beer and wine would increase consumption of beer and wine. This would be extrapolated and wide.
Thank you for this discussion. I have now further question, and I give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you, Professor Pavlova, for your position. Now we come to the following opponent, who is also a member of the assessment committee, and that's Professor Dracini, and he's Professor of Surgery and Dean of the Institute of Faculty of Medicine in the University of Medicine in Tirana, Albania. And thank you, Professor Dracini, for coming all the way from Albania, albeit online. The University of Maastricht is always proud to have guests from abroad. The floor is yours. You have to unmute. We don't hear you.
Perfect. Now I think everything is okay. Thank you, Prorector, for the presentation, and I am very happy to be part of this assessment committee. Of course, I have read carefully the prospect of the candidate, the dissertation, seen the articles, and also the topic, which is much interesting. I congratulate the candidate about the good work done, and also the supervising team that has done also excellent work, I think. But hearing the presentation and of course thinking about all the topics treated, I have two questions, and the first one for the candidate also, for the Mrs. Candidate. Also, I am eager to know what are the main lessons that are learned from this process of Europeanization of Western Balkans. And besides that, I am interested to know if these lessons learned, if they may be helpful even for other countries that are in the same conditions, perhaps, I don't know, Ukraine or Caucasus region or other parts of the Europe. So this is the first question, and perhaps we can discuss this and then pass to the second one.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. So the main lessons learned, this thesis actually helps the countries to see in general the political changes in each of the countries, to start to learn from each other what worked in some countries and what did not work. So for instance, Croatia is one of the countries that undertook a wide hospital reform that was very successful, and the other Western Balkan countries can learn from it. On the other side, Western Balkan countries should need, the biggest learning, I think, is that they should learn from each other. They should go together in the EU. And actually, when I made my first study, this is what I was thinking, and all the time having as a lessons learned. And now later on, we had this Open Balkans Summit, that actually the Western Balkan countries should work together. After learning from the policies together, they can join the EU. Before that, the Albanian population, for instance, or even professionals would go to an EU country for a working abroad session, for instance, to learn and to come back. But in fact, they should learn from the region rather than from other countries of the EU. So these lessons learned should also help the other countries of Caucasus or Ukraine, as you said, that they should go and learn from each other in their region. In the Caucasus region, or Ukraine, for instance, can learn from next countries like Poland or countries of Central Europe, because the realities are different. So they cannot compare themselves, for instance, Albania with Northern Europe, for instance.
Perfect. Thank you. And of course, even personally, I think that the Open Balkan process is a good one and may help Western Balkan countries to be sooner part of the European Union. And besides that, I am interested to know, besides the top-down policy changes or the policy of taking the directives from the institutions or the officials, are there that you have that you have extensively presented in the dissertation? Are there any examples of bottom-up policy change in the Western Balkans country, perhaps even in Albania? So, of the decisions that are made from the population or referendums or other things?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. In fact, the Western Balkan countries, most of them, beside of Croatia, that is a EU candidate country, all of them are potential candidate countries, or most of them candidate countries. So in fact, in this case, they are more having a top-down rather than a bottom-up legislative change, because they have to change their legislation based on the EU acquis. And after being part of the EU as Croatia, they can have political changes in their countries that can be an example as well for other EU countries and having a bottom-up effect. In this case, the only lessons learned would be for the countries of the region. The legislative changes of Albania are helpful to be part of the EU, but cannot be a great example of bottom-up effect to have that all the European countries have these changes. Rather than Albania improves on its own and serve as an example for the countries of the region rather than for all EU countries.
Thank you, Mrs. Candidate. Principally, I don't have other questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Dracini, for your opposition. And now we come to the third opponent, who is also a member of the assessment committee, that's Professor Fernandez Aguria, and he's from the Andalusian School of Public Health, EASP Granada, in Granada. And thank you for coming all the way from Granada, Professor Fernandez Aguria.
Thank you to you, Prorector. I would like to start giving a very warm congratulations to the candidate, because she was very brave addressing not only the issue of Europeanization in a very complex region, but also to address a very complex issue that is composed of the main elements of the public health, like the health system, the pharmaceutical policy, some issues related with health promotion and protection of the health of the population. But she did that, you did that, Mrs. Candidate, in a different period of time. You build up different studies covering a very wide period of time. And probably when you were finishing some of them, you were seeing that the context was changing a lot, and has already changed because of the topic that is very dynamic and is very complex, affected by three main issues that were happening just at the end of your study or after the period of your study, which are the Brexit, that could affect the the willingness of other European countries to join the European project, from one side, the COVID that is still affecting all the world and the European region, that was addressing mainly the organization of the public health in the European region, and also the invasion of Ukraine that is affecting, and the side effects are affecting all the European region and affecting health determinants that are very important for the health of the population. So my question is related about what do you think that these recent events can affect the Europeanization of the Western Balkan countries, and if are affecting already, what kind of effects do you see that are happening, and how can we address that in order to continue facilitating the Europeanization of the Western Balkan countries?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. So regarding the Brexit, actually it happened during my research, and there was no doubt in the Western Balkan countries about willing to join the EU. So even though that Brexit happened, Western Balkan countries continued to have the same aim of joining the European Union. Regarding COVID, yes, it happened during my, I can say in the end of my studies, that the articles were already finished and sent for publication, happened COVID. The effects of the COVID, I can say that are mostly economical. That at the time that COVID happened, the Western Balkan countries, as they are not very rich ones, took all their possibilities, resources to face COVID, and they were not much focusing at that time at putting money to make legislative changes towards Europeanization rather than facing the situation. Now that COVID is not the biggest issue of the moment in the countries, they are all back at the Europeanization process, as well as what happened in Ukraine made both Western Balkan countries and as well as the European Union thinking that the Western Balkan countries should progress towards Europeanization. And what we see now is that beside of the open Balkans that I mentioned, now today in Tirana is happening a summit that all the Western Balkan countries together with the EU are having an open summit for the integration of EU, so of the Western Balkans in the EU, and it's happening now that we are talking. So in fact, what's happening in Ukraine was a lessons learned also for EU to make the process of Western Balkans joining faster the European Union and not to have other influences around.
Okay, thank you for this clear answer. Positive answer of some of the effects of these events that are happening now, at least from your observation of what is happening in the region. And I would like also to ask you, because you were mentioning in the discussion and some recommendations that you do in the text about the need of having a better monitorization of some indicators for knowing better how the implementation of the policies are affecting the health of the population. And now, I don't know if you are aware that are developing an European regulation for the European health data space that is going to cover all this health information, and not only for the population and politicians, but for health health professionals and policy makers. And if you are aware about that, what would you consider that is important to include in this European health data space in order to have better monitorization of the effects of the health policies change for the Europeanization of these Western Balkan countries?
Thank you. So in this case, I have the list. Let's say there are 27 main health topics that the Western Balkan countries are reporting to the EU, not considering only chapter 28 of the report that is focusing on health issues, but taking in consideration the entire report, there are 27 topics. So for each of them should be included in the report. For instance, there should be also data, for instance, for smoking. There is a lot of legislation going on in Western Balkans, reported as well in the progress reports about legislative changes of non-smoking areas inside. Even though there is such legislation, in some places there are people smoking inside. So we need to have this data to see how this Europeanization process towards the smoking legislation, as I did, for instance, for alcohol, but we can do similar studies for smoking, is influencing. And in this case, there should be more data not only for smoking, but also for how the legislation is being obeyed in these countries and reinforced to be obeyed, because there is a legislation for non-smoking inside, but sometimes it's not being obeyed. So I think that the EU database should include data for the 27 topics that I mentioned, to be as broad as we can, and then researchers can use this data to make further studies.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Candidate. And my turn is ended, so I come back to the prorector.
Thank you very much, Professor Fernandez Aguria, for your opposition. We come now to the following opponent, who's also a member of the assessment committee, and that is Professor Dr. Kommers. He's associate professor in the Department of European Public Health in the University of Maastricht. Dr. Kommers.
Thank you, Prorector. Dear candidate, I first would like to compliment you on completing an impressive series of studies looking at the evolution of health-related policies in the Western Balkan countries. It seems clear that there has been a progression in those policies. However, your dissertation focuses on and contends that Europeanization, as defined by Radielli, has driven that evolution. And I would like to question your overall contention that Europeanization is the force driving those changes, and maybe even question somewhat the usefulness of that contention. I'd like to do that by discussing a little bit and examining the policy windows theory of John Kingdon, which you employ briefly on page 54. Kingdon says that a problem must be present to begin. Secondly, that policy options must be ready and have legitimacy. And finally, that there must be political support before a policy window will open and policy can be changed. So if Europeanization was the driver of the changes that you discuss, then the EU would be driving the perception of a problem. It would be supplying viable policy options, and it would be generating political support for change. I accept that you do show some of the policy options that the EU has promoted as responsible and viable steps for health. But I have two questions. First of all, do you have any evidence that the EU creates perceptions of a health or political problem that is driving the changes you describe? And my second question is, do you have any evidence that the EU creates political support within the member states for implementing the policies that address those problems?
Thank you, esteemed opponent, for your question. So regarding the problems identified, in a way, I can say that it's not the EU generally identifying the problems. There are the countries identifying the problems based on the EU acquis. So there are the EU acquis, and each of the countries has to report based on the EU acquis and the developments of country policies on these acquis. But depending on the political will of each government, they are having high political agenda, each of the country, depending on the acquis. As I mentioned in my first study, there are these main three topics, for instance, public health legislation, health insurance, and health services that have been very high on the agenda of Western Balkan countries, policymakers. So in this case, I can say that sometimes there are the governments that identify the problems, put them in their agenda and start to change them based on the acquis. Regarding the support of the EU, they are giving support through the EU delegations in each of the countries. For instance, in Albania, we have EU delegation that is supporting with funds, supporting with different instruments like IPA instrument. For instance, I mentioned non-formal education methodology in my study, that EU is putting a lot of money there for the Western Balkan countries and for the entire Europe to start to train young people and all other professionals, not only for non-formal education methodology, but also for other instruments like IPA, for instance, funds that are available for the countries to be used. And this is, let's say, a support that the EU is giving to the Western Balkan countries to improve their legislation and also the ways that they are working. But of course, that there are each of the countries putting the agenda, their own agenda based on their problems. On the other side, EU is giving recommendations. Of course, that they are not identifying the problems, but they are giving recommendations on each of the countries on the changes. In Albania, for instance, they are recommending highly to have law enforcement, to have a system of justice and changes in the general system of the country, depending on the issues that they have been fulfilling in the acquis and other things that they need to fulfill.
Thank you, dear candidate. I think that I have just a couple of more minutes, and I do think you've partially answered the question. I would continue to question somewhat the main contention that it is the acquis of the European Union driving the change. I think we see some evidence on both sides that these changes are being driven more or less from within the member states themselves in an attempt to make progress within their countries as they would under any circumstances. I guess my further question for you would be, given you've really based your contentions in Radielli's definition, which includes the term that the EU decisions are then incorporated into the logic of domestic discourse, identities, political structures, and public policies, my question for you would be, is the word Europeanization under that definition maybe just a step too far? And what do you feel the added value is of claiming that Europeanization is driving these changes rather than something more along the lines of policy transfer and learning, for example?
Yeah, I can say that the Europeanization process is driving this because all the time, taking also in consideration Albania, we tried to have our legislative examples based on the EU practice. So this is why I can say that the Europeanization process is driving all of this because at least Albania and the Western Balkan countries are trying to have the example of the European policies extrapolated in their countries, but not only extrapolated, they are also being driven by the political agenda of the countries. So we can say that it's not on both directions fully. It is led by the European integration process, but it's always is also decided by the political agenda of each government.
Thank you very much, candidate. That concludes my questions, Pro-Rector.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kommers, for your position. Then we now go to the following opponent, and that is Dr. van Kessel. And he holds two positions. He's an health policy research associate in the London School of Economics and Political Science, and also assistant professor in the Department of International Health in the University of Maastricht. And Dr. van Kessel, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Pro-Rector, and thank you, dear candidate, for your illuminating thesis and presentation earlier. I would first like to extend my congratulations to both yourself and the supervision team for the large amount of work that you've put into your thesis. And it was a joy reading it in preparation for this defense. You've tackled a multidisciplinary topic in Europeanization that can affect a number of different pillars within society as that society prepares to access the European Union. I do have some discussion points that I would like to raise with you today. The first one being on non-formal education. In your general discussion, you state that non-formal education is often used in community education or lifelong education, and that it can reinforce marginalization and stigmatization, so you recommend against using this for children with disabilities. Now, as part of the Europeanization process, Western Balkan countries have adapted their formal education policies as well to better include children living with disabilities in primary and secondary classrooms. So my question to you, the first question is, what can non-formal education take away from the changes in the formal education system in terms of addressing the diverse needs of children with disabilities?
Thank you, esteemed opponent. Children with disabilities are a big issue in the region, if I can say so, because nowadays there are special schools functioning in the region. One of the policies being undertaken, as well as per the models of the European Union, as these children are being integrated to normal schools. This is the first that each government is undertaking as policies. Nowadays, we are seeing children with disabilities at normal schools with their friends, and this is the first step of their integration. But on the other side, there are other issues that children need to learn. It's not what children need to know. It's not all what they learn at school, but there are also other soft skills that they need to learn about better communication, about health issues, about how to build a team group, etc. So in this way, non-formal education would give a big support. We are not using non-formal education and skipping formal one. Non-formal education is to support formal education. Is that, of course, children need to go to school, but there are other further trainings needed that might support not only children with disability, but all young people to improve their skills and competencies for their life. I say all the time not to put children out of the school and to have non-formal education. It is there to support the formal one.
I fully agree with you that non-formal education is there to support one. What I was more aiming for is, with all of these innovations that happen within the education system, is there something that non-formal educators can learn from the innovations that are already happening in formal education, whether it be approach, resources, or any other contexts?
Actually, in the context of the region, I would say that the formal education can learn more from non-formal one rather than the opposite. Okay. Non-formal education is using very attractive methods. In the region, there is the East method of learning. Actually, the school is very formal, it's very hard for children, and they have to stay in class all the time. Non-formal education methodology, all the activity is built in a team group. And children are not competing with each other, but they are learning from each other. So in this stage, I would say that formal education needs to include non-formal education elements in it rather than the opposite.
Thank you. That's very illuminating. Now, I want to move away slightly from non-formal education, and I want to go back to where this defense started with chapter 3. I also have some questions regarding the methodology thereof. Now, a process like Europeanization is a process that takes many, many years. And what I found rather puzzling in your choice of methodology is the lack of robustness checks, for instance, an event study model, where you might indicate whether there was an anticipatory effect towards signing or starting the accession process that could potentially influence your findings. Is this something you can comment on?
Yes, what I can say is that when I started the study, I made an analysis to see where the countries were. In fact, there was a very high level of alcohol consumption at that time. I completed my study and I saw a decrease with 1 liter per capita in these 3 countries. If I would go, like yesterday, I checked again the levels of alcohol consumption. This is why I was talking for smoking before, is that the levels of alcohol consumption in the region about spirits is continuing to decrease. Is that these changes are continuing all the time, but before starting the Europeanization process, the levels of alcohol consumption were very high. Nowadays, they are continuing to decrease, even though my study is finished. For instance, when my study finished on alcohol, the alcohol level consumption in Montenegro were 11 liters per capita. Now, there were 13, now it's 11. So they have been decreasing for a period. Sorry
to interrupt you, but I don't contend with the fact that they have been decreasing. What I contend with is the notion that they may have been slightly decreasing up to the point that the Europeanization process started, and that could potentially confound your results. Is that something you can comment on?
For this reason, I conducted regression models. In the regression models, I could put in control these factors, and they allowed me to keep control on these issues and to see how it is going on. Taking in consideration this cut in time that was the Europeanization process. So Europeanization process was considered as a cut in time. I saw, if we see the table, we have the treated countries and the controlled countries. So the treated means that countries that have started the Europeanization process, and non-treated are the controlled countries. But let's say the treatment starts after the Europeanization process, and this go aside with the political changes in the countries. The consumption was very high, and it was not decreasing at a certain moment. After the Europeanization process, we had this cut in time. The political changes started in the region, and also this was reflected on the levels of consumption. So both political changes and levels of consumption were in the same line. And due to these political changes that have been continuing since 2017, that my article was published, till now, that is 2022. In fact, these decreases have been continuing due to these political changes.
Now, I see time is slowly running out, so I would like to ask one more question. Could you elaborate why you eventually chose a differences design over, for instance, an interrupted time series design, which is effective, which could also lead you to the results that you found today? What gave the preference over diff and diff over interrupted time series?
Yes, in fact, the difference in different design was much used in US and similar studies. as I said, for marijuana. Time series studies are in a way part of the cohort studies, and I didn't have the data needed to have time series study. Meantime, with the difference in difference analysis, I was able to conduct the analysis because, as I mentioned, the progress report do not give much quantitative data. The only data that I could find was in the database of World Bank that would give the consumption in liters per capita in each year from 1991 in each year per each country. So I didn't have much population data to have time series.
Okay, thank you very much. I hand the word back to the pro-rector.
Thank you very much, Dr. Van Kessel, for your opposition. We would like to start a second round of questions, but I think that Padel will enter any second. So that's the ora est, which I expected indeed at 2 o'clock. And that means, Ms. Tresa, Ms. Candidate, that the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed, and the degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and of your defense. And I request that you and your company online await the results of our deliberation and our return. I suspend. Ladies and gentlemen, I reopen this academic session, and I can announce, Ms. Tresa, that the degree committee here present online has assessed.
The candidate is not on the screen yet.
Oh, why is that?
I'm not sure.
Thank you very much for announcing that. But so that's the first time in my career that I have a lost PhD candidate. Well, she will get a certificate. That's has been decided, but so
perhaps the technical support can see if they can contact her via the telephone.
Technical support is contacting by phone at the moment.
Thank you, Luke.
You're welcome.
oh, she's coming from somewhere. Okay, she's back. So I reopened this meeting. I already mentioned that, and Ms. Tresa, I am happy to announce that the degree committee here present online has assessed the quality of your thesis and of your defense, and in view of its positive verdict and taken into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor, and Professor Chabanovska is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. And I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Thank you, Prorector. I now turn to you, Eni Tresa. Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present online, I hereby confer upon you, Eni Tresa, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, you will soon receive the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the supervisor, affixed with the official seal of the university shown by the beadle. And now I would like to move to a very nice part of this celebration. On behalf of the supervisory team, I would like to give you the laudation. So, dear Dr. Tresa, dear Eni, we, the promotion team, are so proud and delighted that we can address you as Dr. Tresa. Also, congratulations to your family and to all loved ones who have supported you through this journey. You worked very hard for your academic distinction, showing enthusiasm, scientific curiosity, trust, perseverance, resourcefulness, and great tact. You have done your best in consciously developing as a public health academic and public health professionals. And let me explain how. You have shown that you can build and strategize and advance the knowledge base for public health policy intervention for the Western Balkans, which you have proven with your innovative research. You proved that you can activate professional and system-wide and intersectoral networks for the good of the public health and academic research. For example, you reached to Maastricht University when you were the Europeanization student and you were a student of the Andalusian School of Public Health and in Rennes, and you reached to us because you felt that it will be a place to collaborate on the research on Balkans. And you linked us, your supervisors and other colleagues with other professionals in the Balkan countries. And I think that you activated very nice scientific collaborations. And then you, as a professional, you are able to deliver high quality output. And it is also shown by your research and also by your work in the Save the Children agency and also academically at the University of Tirana. As a public health professional, you also volunteer to serve as a mentor for students of the Joint Diploma Euro-Pub Health program, of which you yourself are a graduate. And you help those young people how to navigate in the scientific world and also in the professional world of public health. I think this is a great achievement. You have also managed to deal with the good work-life balance, and I want to mention that during this beautiful PhD journey, you managed to deliver 2 children. Congratulations, Eni. And now I would like to read a short laudation from Professor Gensburazeri. As a public, Eni Tresa has always shown a strong sense of commitment and perseverance. She has diligently managed to accomplish in a remarkable manner several academic requirements, including an international master degree in public health, Euro-Pub Health, 2-year master course, and currently the PhD degree at Maastricht University. Regarding the PhD research work, one of Eni's major contributions is to make the profile of Western Balkan countries present and more tangible in the context of the rapidly changing socio-economic and political landscape, but also at the turning point of Europe's history, given the ongoing war in Ukraine and other global developments. These agitated times call for a more systematic and consistent response to the requirements of the EU accession by all Western Balkan countries, but at the same time require more serious commitment and coherent response by the EU member states. On behalf also of the co-supervisor, I congratulate Eni for this remarkable achievement and wish her lots of success in her future research work and academic engagement. And one more address from Dr. Timo Clemens. It was a pleasure to work with Eni in conceptualizing, planning, and conducting the research for this PhD. Her calm, well thought and determined way of exchanging on research and practical matters was good to experience and led to stimulating discussion, not only for the direct conduct of the PhD, but as well to broader matters of public health. We could observe Eni growing as a researcher, and we were convinced that Eni has become an academic to conduct research independently. Yes, Eni, you are a public health academic, you are a public health professional, and you are a mentor. And we are proud for you. Congratulations.
Thank you for your beautiful laudation, and congratulations, Dr. Tresa, also on behalf of the Maastricht University, and I congratulate you with the degree you have acquired, and I hope you can celebrate this day and hope you have a great career. And also congratulations for Professor Chabanovska, of course, Dr. Clemens and Professor Burazeri. Also congratulations for your family and friends and colleagues here online, and thank you for being here. I would like to thank also the opponents for all their efforts, and of course the technical support of Luc Peters, Joshua Fedu, and the Pedel, who made this online session possible. And well done, thanks again. Having said it all, that I close this academic session.